You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and back here today to talk about profitability as a whole. I've got a great friend, for a while now, Rohan Shah, who is a co-founder over at Extend, also chief revenue officer, but most importantly, just has a fantastic view around what's going on in this space, in the digital space as a whole. Ron, I'll kind of kick it over to you if you want to do a brief intro on yourself and Extend. That'd be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome.
So I guess really quickly on myself, repeat technology entrepreneur, have spent, over a decade building technology companies, both at the startup level, but also for Fortune 500 companies on the consulting side. And, really started Extend because we saw a huge gap in the market in terms of value-added services for brands and retailers. The product we initially took to market was around extended warranties and protection plans. Everyone loves to think about companies like Best Buy or Apple Care when they think about these services. This was something that was not accessible to the broad base of the market and frankly did not have any technology and really didn't focus on customer experience. So we built a technology platform that really supported better customer experiences, digital and digitally native and modern experiences, but also more automation and more support for the brands and retailers that can offer them, which ultimately drives pretty significant bottom line improvements by offering these products. So company itself is about 425 people. We've raised just over $325 million to date. Our last round was led by folks like Nationwide, PayPal, American Express, SoftBank at, I still have to pinch myself at a $1.6 billion valuation. So it's been a pretty tremendous ride. And frankly, the most important piece is the brands and retailers that we work with, because we just get to learn so much from them and then continue to build products and solutions that can support them.
Yeah, love it. And everybody, extend.com, if you want to check it out. They're great friends, partners, come highly recommended throughout the network. I'm talking to, 20 to 30 brands a week, and they come up over and over again. It's a really great product, especially when you think about profitability. But, as we kind of take a holistic view, right now, it's very interesting what's going on across the board. I play a lot in the connector space. Would love to hear what you see going on, as all the brands you're talking to, what's going on around profitability, how they're looking at it, what's top of mind for them. Because I see a couple different groups of people. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. I'll tell you a story first, which is I live in a interesting and hyped up part of the world around Silicon Valley, and the word profitability up until about 5 months ago was something that no one mentioned, which is crazy to me, coming from, a family that had a semiconductor business where it's the only word you think about.
It's true, though, right? There was so much money flowing freely for the past, 2, 3, 4 years. It's been crazy. I love the point, and it's just now popping up that profitability. Yeah. Anyways, didn't mean to interrupt you there, but
no,
you nailed it.
The way I like to look at it is at some point you got to pay the piper, and at some point the cost of capital goes up, and the lack of capital becomes a reality. And so, I sort of segment my thought process around profitability with private and public companies. Private companies have the benefit where they don't have to expose their financials. The issue, however, is that they actually need cash on their balance sheet to support operating the business. And when your mentality is grow at all costs and do everything to affect top line while neglecting everything as it relates to bottom line, you lead yourself into a position where you actually aren't very positive from an outlook perspective today, right? In the current market situation. On the public side, we see the same thing. Unfortunately, a lot of retailers out there, their stocks dropped 70 to 80% in a matter of a quarter or quarter and a half. The instant thought process starts to become, how do we drive bottom line growth? That means cost optimization. That means looking at, in our case, services that are, pure margin, that are just purely accretive to the bottom line. And what we've seen in the market is pretty dramatic in terms of, folks obviously having to think about macroeconomic issues, issues as it relates to like how are they going to sustain their business. But ultimately, what it boils down to is just refocusing and reshifting the narrative internally on we need to think about profitability. And in a way, you need to do that with the customer experience and with the customer lens in mind, because you can't sacrifice the experience that your customers have in doing things that ultimately don't lead to like long-term growth and loyalty and ultimately LTV. So it's been pretty unreal what we've seen in the market. I think people thought we'd be in this sort of bull market forever, which is never the case. But that reality has really set in. And I think it took people a quarter to sort of really come to grip with that reality. And what we're seeing now is a pretty amazing acceleration of bringing in services, bringing in solutions that can really affect profitability.
No, I agree. When I know, just talking to, as many brands as I have the privilege of doing every week, there's, this idea, customer acquisition cost is going through the roof. I hear over and over again, conversion isn't down, right? But website traffic is down. We're thinking of direct to consumer side, right? The traffic is down. The conversion is okay, but they're spending a lot more money to get people to the site.
Yep.
And at that point in time, you've got to recoup the money somehow. So now I agree with you. I've been hearing a lot of what does the on-site experience look like? What are things that we do to retain them? What is lifetime value of the customer? What are the services we can add that increases even the checkout value as a whole?
Yep.
I mean, are you seeing some of the same things?
That's exactly right. I mean, you know the drill. Initially it was like iOS changes, which I think you and I even chatted about at one point, but customer acquisition has just gone through the roof. And so as people think about, growth, it comes at a much higher price tag today. And we are not a marketing tech solution. And so we don't play on that side of the house as much. And frankly, that was like a battle for our team from a sales perspective, is like, how do you compete with solutions that are so heavily focused on getting new customers to a website, which is not really our strong suit, not something that we focus on. What we focus on is how do you solve customer pain points who are already on your website, who actually want to buy a product, but who might experience friction as it relates to their experience around using that product or getting that product in some cases. And so that's where we've really focused. And I think if you look at a lot of the large retailers, extended warranties, for example, Aaron, were used by 1% of the retail market. And that's just in like the number of retailers. That's your Walmarts, Best Buys, Amazons, Costco's, Wayfairs, et cetera, of the world. Why do they have these services? Because they realize customers want them, first and foremost. This is a moot point conversation if customers don't want it. That validation exists. We see anywhere between 10% to 70% of customers buying these extended warranties and protection plans. So the customer demand is there, but really what it does is it serves to drive profit at the transactional level, right? You capture a portion of the revenue from that sale of the extended warranty as pure profit as a retailer. It flows straight to your bottom line and you can start reinvesting it into things like customer acquisition. But then B, it solves a pain point for a customer that then generates brand affinity. So if I, as you know that I tend to do, spill wine on my couch or drop my cell phone, that doesn't have to be a bad experience as it relates to the brand. That can be a really positive one. Something where customers recognize that, am I allowed to swear on this, Aaron? Stuff goes wrong.
Stuff
goes wrong, I'll say.
Probably not. We try to keep a G rating here, and
there we go.
Fully accessible on Apple Podcast.
There you go. Stuff can go wrong, and ultimately, people just want to be taken care of in those situations. They're appreciative of the fact that people step up and take care of them when things go wrong, not tell them, sorry, you're out of luck, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's this overwhelming shift right now as we look back over the past couple years where, people have gone through the digital checklist and checkmarked all the things that they want to add. And we're at a point now where everybody is forced to take a look at that stack and say, hey, am I optimizing it? Is it the right tech stack? How do they all work together? Yep. I mean, I put kind of where you're at also in on the subscription side, right? We're looking for reasons to have a conversation with a customer and blending that with different tech that we might have of how we're going to communicate with the customer. Is it via a mobile app? Is it texting? Is it obviously email is still alive, right? Every different component we can add that provides another potential touch point to have a conversation with the customer, allows us to develop a deeper relationship with the customer. And if they don't want to talk to us at all, then they probably don't want a relationship. And we didn't even miss them in the end anyways, because they weren't going to convert.
It's so important. And I'm going to take credit for you describing it as a conversation, because I said that on a call with you at some point. But, I think it's said differently. It's about having a relationship with the customer, and relationships don't come from transactions. They come from conversations, like to your point. And most often than not, what we see is that people are so focused on the initial engagement that the conversation elements after the point of sale are sort of just left by the wayside. It's like, hopefully that customer will come back. We'll put a marketing campaign together to then just market them new products. Not everyone just wants to buy a new product the minute after they've just purchased one, right? What they want is experiences around the products that they have. You've seen the proliferation of exactly what you said, subscription services in the retail market. You've seen the proliferation of, in-app engagement. We have some partners like iRobot and others that have in-app experiences for their customers to engage with the product. You can now start having a conversation with those folks. Peloton, another great example of someone that just communicates so well with their community through the actual device itself. These are companies that, everyone's struggling right now, let's be clear, with supply chain issues and inflation and you name it, just general market sentiment. But these are folks that can maintain those relationships with their customers and then start to think about, what are other products that we might be able to develop or we might have in inventory already that can solve the pain point that that customer has? It's the same thing that, many of us on the sales side think about when we go and talk to a brand or retailer. It pisses me off when folks just immediately start talking about our company. No one cares yet. What they care about is the problem that they're experiencing right now. And so, one of the things that I try to take as much time as I can to do is just read up online, chat with folks that are in our community or in our portfolio from a customer perspective to just understand like what's top of mind for you. And from there, you can start mapping out both their issues from a merchant perspective, but also the customer journey and seeing what are the touch points that we can provide services around. What are the touch points that we can solve pain points around for our customers? And I think that exercise is something that sometimes gets dropped in many situations.
No, I agree, but I think a lot of it goes back to the organizational design. I'm having a lot of conversations with that around that lately, and we see these digitally native brands are able to accelerate digital growth. And I think a lot of it is just the teams are so small, right? And when customer service is also marketing, marketing is also, the web development piece, it's also around the sales piece. Like everybody's sharing so many different hats. It's almost meshed together and you get a common theme and a common story and a common thread that comes out of a brand that feels authentic. And as a brand grows and you get into, enterprise level, Fortune 500, even Fortune, 5,000 companies, a lot of times, there's that separation of, okay, well, there's the chat function, which falls to customer service, right? And there's email, which falls to marketing. Right. And then there's customer retention teams, right? And then there's the advertising, there's the sales teams, and it's somewhat disjointed. And so a lot of times those stories aren't told, or the brand story isn't told universally. And I think there's things that the ball gets dropped, that it's going to be interesting to see, how the organizational design and what digital teams look like, a year or 2 years from now. Because I think right now we're starting to learn. It's less about, hey, what are all the right tools, but it's more like, how do we use all the tools that we have available?
It's interesting. The parallel to that, I think that we see with a lot of our partners is a lot of companies that we work with are going through pretty significant reorgs right now. And you can take that as, okay, that's natural. Companies go through that. No doubt about it. That's the case. However, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think what you're seeing right now, Aaron, is that companies are trying to aggregate decision-making into smaller pockets as it relates to the P&L, as it relates to customer experiences. Why? Because the decision fatigue, especially for larger companies, and I can say this as a recovering consultant working with a lot of the Fortune 500s out there, the decision fatigue leads to just not doing anything in most cases. And that's something that brands and retailers cannot afford today. Unfortunately, and let's just be honest with ourselves, in 12 months from now, there will be fewer companies that are able to sustain themselves in this market. They will be out of cash. There will be a ton of M&A, in my opinion. Why? Because, the capital that existed and was, the market was flush with 8 months ago just doesn't exist anymore. And so I think, the folks that can react quickly, and that's not in 2 weeks for a, massive multi-billion-dollar retailer, but within a quarter or two, are going to be the ones that find themselves in a better position at the tail end of this.
No, I agree. And just the previous episode of this podcast was around, what's happened in the aggregator space over the past, couple years and the current state of them, which is a lot of that money is dried up, and there's going to be a lot of these smaller ones that they're going to go by the wayside, and the businesses and the small brands that they absorbed along the way. I completely agree with you.
When you look at the unit economics, one of your key levers in there is, as an aggregator, I can get customer acquisition down because I have a streamlined horizontal marketing asset, right? An internal tooling system or team that can streamline across multiple brands rather than just one. The issue is that those unit economics are completely thrown out of whack now. The model itself doesn't sustain the business. So it's sort of like, this having been around the block, but like there are like a sign of the times companies out there that in many cases, unfortunately, like don't sustain themselves when the cost of capital goes up and the cost of acquiring customers goes up.
No, completely agree. There's actually a little bit of a parallel there too, as you think about if you're concerned with the customer acquisition cost, and that's all you're concerned about, and you're not paying attention to the back end, right? Then you're not going to get out of it what you need to get out of it, right? If you're not aligning everything on the back end of your website and tying it all together, including offerings like this extended warranty or subscriptions, right? If it isn't, at some point in time, live streaming, if you're not looking ahead and planning for, hey, what's going to really promote an engagement and relationship with the customer I want? And then we can get into a little bit about what you're talking about, like iOS 14.5 update. The best thing for Amazon advertising, in the past couple of years has been that. Because brands became over-indexed on Amazon, trying to drive more traffic to the direct consumer site. And then that happens. Literally everybody hits Ask App Not to Track. Even the digital marketers that I talk to, they all hit Ask App Not to Track. Part of it was because it's so creepy how they asked it, right? Originally, everything pops up, and I see a lot of like, ahead of time, there's kind of a hey, we'd love to do this. When you get to the next screen, hit Ask, allow to track. But, also you think about Google originally going to take away, third-party cookies. I know they pushed that off another year, but at the same time, pushing, GA4 on everybody, and then the Performance Max campaigns. It throws. If you don't have everything buttoned up, it's going to get really messy, really fast, and people are going to dump money back to Amazon, which nobody really wants to do. They want to own the customer.
They have to.
But where we're at today, you also need to make money, and it's Amazon cash in, cash out. Comes with the price.
And I pride myself on literally having never been the smartest person in any room that I've sat in. But at the end of the day, right, like most of these companies have to make a decision on, do we want to continue selling these products? When we looked at companies like Amazon, all we thought about, like, how do we replicate the experience that they can deliver for their customers for every brand and retailer out there? Because they do a really, really good job. Let's be clear. And that's why, I go to Amazon 3 times a week. I don't like to admit it, but that's the case. And so, extended warranties, you see them pop up actually even more today than you did previously on Amazon, because they see the value from an LTV and retention perspective by offering those products. Many folks talk about a lot in terms of like, I had an issue with my Amazon box not showing up on my doorstep. Have you ever had that? Like a porch pirate, or it showed up damaged, or just was lost in transit?
I've got 4 kids.
Yeah.
It's bound to happen.
and everyone always talks about Amazon. Like, I called them, they replaced it immediately. And it's a fast process. Today, the majority of brands and retailers out there, unfortunately, if you ask them, they'll tell you, of course, we'll replace it for our customer. And I believe them when they say that. Many folks do, because it's important from a CX perspective. But you ask customers and they say it takes me like 7 to 10 days to finally get through to someone and send them pictures of a police report or whatever it may be to actually get that product shipped back to me. And by the end of it, I'm so fed up. So this was something that we heard from a lot of our partners and a lot of our retailers. When you think about extended warranties, customers are having claims like 12 months after they buy it or 18 months after they buy it. So what we did is we actually recently launched, well, not so recently, we're formally announcing it, I guess, a launch of a product around shipping protection. So another value-added service at checkout, customers can pay a super nominal fee and get a super streamlined digital and automated experience around filing a claim for a lost, damaged, and stolen package and having it replaced immediately. And guess what? The retailer actually gets paid for that replacement order as well on the back end. So again, same sort of dynamic with our extended warranty product of not just one touch point at the transaction, but multiple touch points and multiple revenue streams beyond the point of sale. We're now doing the same thing for another product around shipping protection, which actually happens within 30 days of every order rather than 12 to 18 months out. And so you start to build up that brand loyalty and that brand engagement and retention super, super fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's lifetime customer value. Everybody's got to be thinking about it and be concerned with it as, CAC goes up. And I don't see a stop to it going up right now. And maybe it happens towards the end of the year. I mean, it's really interesting to see right now inventory levels at Walmart, Target, even, TJX at an all-time high. A lot of people sitting on inventory as a whole. I mean, there's going to be a lot. You're going to have to move it. You're going to have to move it at a discount. And I mean, somebody is saying, hey, you know what? Christmas will be Christmas again after we've had a couple year hiatus from any kind of discounts, right? But there's going to have to be a lot of money spent and you want to maximize that on the back end. If not, I don't know, you're leaving money on the table, I guess.
You are. And I think I feel very lucky that we as a services company aren't impacted in the same way from a drop in just general consumer spending. I think as consumers have spent less, they actually think a lot more about extending the life cycle of their product or protecting themselves in case anything goes wrong. So we've seen increases from like a performance perspective of our own solution. But the reality from an overall market perspective is that consumer spending goes down. The government's not cutting checks anymore every single month. The market is way down and people are pulling back. Interest rates have gone up. Inflation has gone up. Supply chain issues have further impacted pricing. So all of these things are inevitably going to lead to people just buying less things, which is a reality that we've had to sort of build into our financial planning and our forecasting, simply because we don't expect that's going to change anytime soon. I'm curious if a lot of the folks you guys work with have seen something similar. I mean, we've seen not a massive, but a real drop in the overall spend at a lot of different partners that we work with.
Yeah, and it's just a reoccurring, theme. And I'd say everybody, unless you're in a normal grocery run, right? Still, people are going to buy soap and toothpaste and food.
Yep.
Ultra luxury, has not really been affected. But literally everything else from fashion to home goods, housewares, everything has been impacted at this point in time. And again, it's not that they're saying the conversion is down. It's just the traffic. People aren't going out looking to spend money like they have. The other part of it is just, the past couple of years, people bought everything they needed, right? In a lot of cases, right? Everybody got an air fryer, right, over the pandemic, right? And so at the same time, we hit these summer months and people, if the money left over, they've got the clothes, they've got everything, they've got 2 TVs, they've got everything they bought. They're going, we see all the flight delays and everything. They're traveling, they're doing stuff that's experiential. I just don't think coming out of it, there's going to be more cash available. It's not like it's going to shift. I think the cash is going to be gone. Yeah. And a lot of people are holding their breath. It's
unfortunate to see, but I think it's a result of how the market looked 12 months ago, which is you see the majority of companies today, laying people off. It's sad. It's unfortunate. Everyone wishes it didn't happen. But the problem is when you have companies that have just hired so dramatically based on the numbers that they were seeing, right? Which during COVID, we all know numbers went through the roof. They have to scale back now. I mean, I was reading something a couple of days ago about Shopify. I think there was like 10% of their workforce, which is a massive number of human beings. But the growth curve just hasn't sustained itself through this current paradigm. So it is scary in many cases. I think it all leads back to that first word you used, which is just profitability. How do we continue to grow our net income on an overall basis and quarter over quarter by thinking about different experiences for customers? I love that you said live streaming, because I guess I'm a fan, and I've invested in a few companies in the space. I just think you have to make it a more engaging experience if you want your conversion metrics to continue to sustain themselves. If you want to get customers to your website, you have to leverage influencer marketing, which I think is something personally that I think will grow over the coming years, as well as social media continues to just, go crazy. And then on the back end, services, in my mind, right? The cost of products is not going down anytime soon, unfortunately. So how do you maintain your margin profile or even increase your margin profile with services? It's the same thing that companies have leveraged for decades from a gross margin perspective, is high margin services. So it is interesting to see, but I think all roads right now lead back to profitability.
Oh, I agree. And I think also, expanding where you're at from the standpoint of, if the total number of people that you can, contact right now and bring into it is small, and the number is going down, then broaden the customer base that you might have. And by that, I mean, I have a lot of people now that thought they were, and I did a podcast with Charlie Ninegar over at not Spy Optic. But anyways, just a great one around going to brick and mortar as a next option. I have a ton of people right now looking to go international. And that's just a reality is the total number of people available to buy your product is shrunk based on your current sphere of influence. You need to expand it. And that's not something that was really talked about a couple of years ago.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head with one piece there, which is like going to stores. We work with a number of different brands. I won't mention any names because it's somewhat confidential on their end. But like, guess what? Stores are expensive from a real estate perspective. Don't get me wrong. But what they found is that retention and engagement with customers that actually have that experience in the store is so much higher. And then those customers are going back and buying products on their online e-commerce site. And so I think stores are really interesting right now because, to your point, people are still going out and traveling. People are going to dinner way more than they were 2 years ago. How do you use that foot traffic and leverage it in an environment where we all know that conversion rates are so much higher in store than they are online, right? So once you get that customer into your store, your odds of making a few bucks are much higher. And so that's an area that we've been focusing on a lot for, some of our products, is just how do we better support our in-store merchants and our in-store retailers with their ability to sell and offer services to their customers too.
Yeah, what are you the most excited about over the next, 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months?
On the Extend side?
Anywhere in digital. Yeah.
Well,
could be, anything in digital.
I probably spend more than enough of my time thinking about Extend. So I'll give you that answer too. I think broadly speaking, it sounds bad, but in a weird way, I'm a bit appreciative at times for the reality check that the current market's sort of driven, and call me old fashioned or whatever. But like, I just think some of the core business fundamentals around EBIT and free cash flow and profitability have just gotten lost in sort of the chaos of the bull market that we lived in. I think it's really good and really healthy for some of those companies to have a bit of a reality check. And I don't want that to sound pejorative, but I just think it's healthy for the business too. It's healthy for the employees of that business also to have a business focusing on those fundamentals so that they're sustainable for the long term. And just to be clear, I'm included in that same group, right? I think that same reality check to a certain extent was something that we had to have it Extend. I think we planned for it well ahead of time. And, we've, as old school folks, always thought about profitability and had a plan that was in place to get us there, regardless of what the cash was on our balance sheet. But I think that reality is something that I think will lead companies to make better and stronger decisions in the long term. So from a digital perspective, as well as from an in-store and retail perspective, I think it's a healthy inflection point where people are starting to think more about their core business and how they really, really get to profitability ultimately, which most folks aren't today.
Awesome. Love it. Well, Rohan, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast today. A great friend, partner, supporter of the network as a whole, and just appreciate your insights as always. And so with that, I'd encourage people look up Rohan Shah on LinkedIn. You can also check out extend.com. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. If you enjoyed the episode, we encourage you to, reach out, like it, subscribe to it, and share it with a friend. Just really enjoy continuing this digital journey together with you. Everybody, take care.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend.